welcome to the House of ZK Radio, which is a focused podcast and media channel exploring everything ZK, zero knowledge. I'm Alice. I'm a host at House of ZK Radio. Today I'm joined here with our guest, Shiv, who is CEO of Boundless. And Boundless is actually going to be joining House of ZK in an event at the end of this month at Token 2049. And this interview excerpt will be included in our magazine as well. So anyone who wants to see like a written format of that, be sure to check that out. But thank you so much, Shiv, for joining us today. I'm really excited to speak to you all about prover markets, about what Balance is doing, kind of the transition from risk zero. So I'm very excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Alice. It's been a while. Last time we spoke was September, so looking forward to this and also looking forward to Token 2049. Like I said, I'm Shiv. I'm the CEO of Boundless. Before that, ran product engineering at Risk Zero, ran engineering at Ava Labs, Coinbase, Microsoft, Amazon, Lyft, Grab, which is a Southeast Asian rideshare company. You're going to be using that in Singapore if you want to get anywhere. So, I built that. There was like hundreds of people, but I was one of the earlier EMs there. My background as an engineer, mostly in storage systems, database systems, and as a leader or a executive, mostly market design for digital services, digital goods, physical services, physical goods. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of the power of markets. I have both a CS degree and an economics degree. So yeah, in a very weird way, it feels like I was headed towards building Boundless my entire career.
Yeah, nice. And it's really cool to hear the extensive experience that you had in a lot of these bigger companies, and then also how that really shaped or kind of your thinking about the power of behind these markets, whether that be in digital form or physical goods. And yeah, very, very nice to hear that all of this kind of led to your work today with Boundless. And before we get into some more details about what Boundless is about, I wanted to ask you about just some context as to why Boundless was created in the first place, specifically related to some of the challenges that we see in ZK proof generation today. What's really the need for users to outsource their proofs during the proof generation process? And what is the need for developing this type of proof marketplace as opposed to, say, teams building their own pipeline for proofs, their own custom-made pipeline, or an application-specific proof network? Just curious to hear about the need for proof markets today and the real need for users to outsource their proofs.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I think if you actually, pull yourself back like 19 months, there was only one ZK VM out there, Risk Zero. 18 months ago, it became two, and today there's like 44. Probably like another 10 that I don't know of, or like just haven't been named yet. And that's great. And that was actually part of the plan. When Risk Zero actually put out the ZK VM and we open sourced it, we knew from day one that it's not a defendable moat. Like, you can just copy it, fork it, use it. So how exactly are we supposed to build a business around it? But we also understood that to succeed as a company that builds ZK VMs or ZK tech, we need proliferation of ZK is a necessary condition for us to succeed. And to be honest, phase one has gone really well now that we have so many people using ZK, understanding ZK, building their own ZK VMs. It's a great signal that people are now more and more familiar with incorporating ZK. And I can very confidently say, because I'm privy to all of these conversations, every major L1 and L2 you've heard of has ZK in their roadmap. Ethereum famously does, because Vitalik just straight up blogs about it, and lots of other chains as well. And it's all like within this sort of 6 to 9 month timeline where you're going to see ZKification, snarkification of their chains and so on. So that's one aspect of it. The other one is the actual setup of Web3 isn't conducive to setting up your own data center or relying on AWS for all your services. Those are traditionally the two mechanisms by which you run hardware to run your software. You either have your own data centers or you rent it from AWS. They have failure points. They negate the philosophy of censorship resistance and taking centralized dependencies and all of these things. So any sort of dependency that these chains have to take has to inherit the same properties of the chain. That means you need to build a fully decentralized protocol to actually serve up ZK in every chain. A lot of people have like, oracles in mind where like oracles are served to every chain. How do you actually bring ZK to every chain? That's the problem that we've been trying to solve with Boundless, and we've actually hit a very significant set of milestones with our proving capacity, liveness guarantees, and so on. We have over 2,500 provers on mainnet beta. We've served over 1.5 quadrillion cycles. It's like we are head and shoulders above the, if anyone want to perceive competition or whatever, like, but that is the power of decentralization. Ethereum can safely take a bet on Boundless, and they are, and like Solana can safely take a bet on Boundless, and they are. Same with Base and Ronin and all of these folks as well, because it's a completely decentralized protocol that just serves up compute for you on demand. The other thing is, why is it a marketplace? Well, cost of proving is traditionally the biggest blocker for initial adoption. To be honest, this is true of every business. The cost of adoption is very high initially, and then like your run up is lower, which is why there's like onboarding cost for any business, which is why distribution is power. Like that's just how business works generally. We wanted to make sure we understand the power of tokens, understand the power of markets, incorporate that in our protocol, so we can actually create subsidy effects. This allows for initial adoption. This allows for people to try things out. This allows for people to come in hard with heavy proofs and get them done at reasonable prices. This allows for earning opportunities for the prover. So that's really the reason why you want it to be a marketplace as well.
Yeah, got it. And that's a really great point that you also mentioned that, especially for the Web3 context, um, because we have these properties that we really prioritize with decentralization, with censorship resistance, our current ways of, say, running Web2 based operations, like, say, outsourcing to AWS or having our own data centers, is not really conducive as compared to what's needed in Web3 because there are failure points, because there's no decentralization. It's a great point you mentioned that we have to inherit kind of these same properties that exist on the chain. And that's what really led to this need for a decentralized protocol and for Boundless specifically able to serve compute for users really on demand and at reasonable prices as well. So it's really great how the team took all of these factors into consideration. And even what you mentioned about just on the cost side, its need for its cost to be kind of as low as possible just to spike up that initial adoption, and then also even incentivizing the rewards for the people generating these proofs. Great to hear that kind of all parties in this process have some incentives to participate as well.
Yeah, I
So it's
mean,
really great to hear all these. Mhm.
there's like an interesting factoid here, which is the median cost of proving on mainnet beta right now is $0. So your proving is free. We don't expect it to be free forever, but what that actually means is the people are valuing the mined token so much that they are just willing to do proving for free. We expect to carry that behavior into mainnet, where it severely subsidizes your cost of proving. This is actually true for Bitcoin, Filecoin, and similar mineable assets as well, where people value the mined asset, and that subsidy flows into the job, as it were. And that is something we wanted to harness, and that's something we've successfully done. The whole experiment with mainnet beta for us was, can we do production grade business using real money, and see the subsidy effect play out and show it to people. We were successful on all fronts, and that's really been one of the reasons why Boundless has been so accepted by the community, so accepted by people who want to engage and build with Boundless. You can see that in our Kaito sale. You can see that in like the community putting forward over $1 million in ETH to like prove the next chain and so on. So we're extremely happy that we've been able to both educate people about ZK, educate people about good market design and good tokenomics design, and also harness both of them to create this sort of flywheel, even before we go into mainnet, that we can basically just supercharge over the next few years and really bring verifiable compute and ZK to every chain and every application.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate also you mentioning that education aspect as well, especially when it comes to not only just on the ZK adoption side, but on how you design token and markets and then generating that flywheel effect, and making sure that it's sustainable in the long term. So it's all great considerations that are made by the Boundless team. And then I also wanted to ask you just your opinion on the other kinds of proving that's available. So with proof markets and proving services, that's more server-based proving. And there's a lot of ZK teams who are also looking into client-based or client-side proving as well. Curious to hear from your side, any kind of significant trade-offs you see between these two approaches. One with outsourcing proofs to, say, like a proof marketplace, compared to just generating that proof locally. Like, for example, if there's any sort of privacy-based applications where maybe some users would feel safer if they were able to generate proofs on their own end. But even with like proof outsourcing, there is less overhead, and then users, there's not as many barriers anymore because users don't need to have the computational resources to prove by themselves. So curious to hear about your thoughts on like both ends and any trade-offs that you see and need to be considered.
Yeah, so that's a great question. It deserves a pretty long answer, so I'm going to try and just jump into it. So what I would say is a verifiable compute. If you remove verifiable, you just get compute. Verifiable compute has the same properties as compute. And what that actually means is you need server-side compute, you need client-side compute, you need edge compute, you need all of it. There is no question that like client-side proving is one of the most important initiatives that we need to actually sort of conquer. That it needs to be done, and there are a lot of teams, including RiskZero, that are working towards this. But the way to get to client-side proving is through server-side proving. You first, optimize for large beefy machines, and then you miniaturize your code. If you start with trying to optimize for mobile, you won't actually get there, and it's a much harder problem, which is why it's taking longer. By longer, I mean like we're like 6 to 9 months away from seeing like an unoptimized but usable system, and maybe like a few months after that, we'll have like something that is super optimized. So that's happening no matter what. So that's like the setup. Um, the important thing to consider is how exactly do you sort of interact with ZK, and what are the use cases that you would interact with ZK, right? You identified PII information and trying to keep it secure on your personal device. That is a extremely useful use case, in my opinion. I manage compliance at Coinbase, all of compliance engineering, launching countries, handling PII information, GDPR, CCPA, SOC 2 compliance. It's just like mind-bogglingly complex. People think it's simple. I see these tweets, which are, in my opinion, lack nuance and are basically just like people just squaring off and saying like, "Hey, just do ZK KYC." Oh yeah, cool. And then what? You think the US government will be like, you did ZK KYC, but you don't have any data to show it, and that's totally okay? That's not how things work. Compliance is a three-party problem. It's like you need to provide me with documents, and the government needs to tell me that this is good enough. Otherwise, I get into trouble and the service gets cut off. So there are three parties here. So it'll take a little bit longer, and that's good because it gives us time to like build out the technology as well. So you actually need client-side proving to really sort of take off and then show itself in non-critical use cases. So people immediately jump to banks and fintech and managing social security numbers. You really don't want to do that. You want to start with like college campuses and can I show my ID somewhere and like get into bars and like driver's licenses and like slowly go up the ladder rather than like start right at the most critical use case and like break everything. You want to find a ladder of adoption. So that's very very important. But in the meantime, there's actually quite a lot of use cases that just require server side compute. I would say 80 to 90%. Like, to be honest, if I ask people, okay, client side proving, privacy, identity, what else? And then people just blank out. because they just don't know what comes after. So so there are these very critical but small workloads that need to be run on the client. But for the larger workloads, for more sort of compute heavy workloads where your iPhone will just get drained and so on and so forth, you need server side or something on the edge. That's going to be like very, very critical. So we're chasing all of that. Now, there is a problem that like people don't really discuss too often on the Web3 side, which is the way our markets are designed is we connect them to a token, and the token accrues value, and this allows for lowering onboarding cost, giving people incentives to adopt, giving people incentives to build, and so on and so forth. Client-side proving has this unique property that it's on your device. It is hard to connect a token to it because you just don't. It's just don't talk to any network. You're just doing it locally. That's the whole point. Um, Interestingly, Boundless does have a solution for this. We are not yet in a position to like fully publicize this, but we do have a mechanism to connect our client-side proving to our token as well. We are looking forward to next year when maybe we can start talking about incentivizing privacy. That is going to be the killer play, in my opinion. If I just go to you and say like, please start using passkeys, you'll be like, yeah, nah, I just have my passwords. I'm done. I'm not, I don't, I mean, I barely know anybody outside the security industry who rotate their passwords. I rotate my passwords. I used to work in cybersecurity for like a little bit of time, and I'm just kind of aware of like what shit goes on. So I'm a little anal about it. But next to no one rotates their passwords. Now, passkeys, if Apple doesn't force people and make it much easier using UX to like push passkeys to people, no one will use them. But if there is a mechanism to incentivize you, adoption will be faster. So that's something we are chasing as well. I think that's the mechanism of like how proving is done, whether on client or server. It's about the incentives for people to actually use them. It either needs to come in the form of ecosystem lockout, which we can't really control. We are not Apple. Incentives or better UX, like massively better UX. And for a long time, what people have really chased is like, oh, I'll just make the UX better. Better than what? Web 2? Okay. That's a really hard hill to climb. There are more opportunities. People should really start exploring tokenomics a lot more, understanding how you can actually incentivize behaviors a lot more. That will really sort of like, in my opinion, change people's perspective on how to use client-side proving, or adopting more avant-garde technologies like ZK for their applications and so on. So that's something we are chasing. Of course, we want to make UX better, but it's not all of it is under our control when it comes to UX. User behavior is not that easy to predict and like optimize. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's great that you mentioned that point about really at the end of the day, it's about the incentivization and how you plan on doing that that can really drive users' behavior. And about incentivizing privacy as well. Yeah, I personally believe that's very important. I mean, right now, a lot of users would really sacrifice their privacy for convenience. And even for, you mentioned like rotating passwords and how very few people do that. But even just something like two-factor authentication, a lot of people just would avoid doing that if they could because there's an extra step that's involved. And even if it takes like just a couple more seconds, that's still like a big pain point for users because they don't want to have any extra overhead when they're trying to log into some application. So really great that even say on like the UX side, maybe that part can't be addressed, but there's another component as part of user behavior, which is the incentivization component that you can address. So it's really great to hear that the Boundless team is looking at these different aspects. And even on your point about the ladder of adoption, really great that you mentioned that as well, like in terms of just being able to integrate these use cases, not starting off with big players like big banks, governments, but starting from smaller cases. You mentioned college campuses and then working your way up there, doing that initial testing, showing results, and being able to build up from there is really important. So really great that you mentioned kind of all of these points and this overall like macro perspective that you have. So yeah, I really appreciate that. And I also wanted to ask you about, we previously spoke a bit about the decentralization component and how that's really needed. Um, but I wanted to know more about what really makes like a proof marketplace decentralized. How does it differ from any kinds of like existing centralized proving services? And if there's any kinds of trade-offs between those that are centralized, which maybe they potentially have less overhead, versus those that are decentralized, which has its own benefits, like with the liveness guarantees, like with censorship resistance and those kinds of properties.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So there's like three kinds of proving setups that you can really think about. Maybe there's more, but like these three buckets, I think, cover most of them. One is, of course, centralized, where you just maybe rent AWS or have your own DC, and you just take jobs, prove them. Somebody writes you a check, basic Insta SaaS service, and you get paid. That's possibly the most simple, but obviously has the biggest disadvantage is like if you have an outage, you have an outage. That's it. You can't take a critical dependency on this. Even AWS has outages. Even AWS has issues as well. Like so, it's not good enough for I would say any major player. If you're like an eigen or like someone, this is not what you would use for your service. Your otherwise up and running service will just degrade, and you don't want to take that dependency. The next one is distributed proving. This is what a lot of so distributed versus decentralized is like very well cataloged. You can Google it. You can look at ChatGPT. It's very well defined. But crypto Twitter loves playing games with this. People confuse both these terms, distributed versus decentralized, and people who are distributed like to claim they're decentralized, but that's not actually true. Distributed proving essentially has a single point of failure. Somebody is distributing the work. So let's say instead of just using AWS, you have AWS, Azure, and a couple of other provers that are based somewhere else, and maybe they're not cloud companies, they're like other people. And your job is to take these proofs, requests coming in, and say you can do that one, you can do that one, you can do that one, you can do this one, and you sort of like coordinate all this. And you can claim that you have 4 provers or 5 provers or 10 provers, but you're not decentralized at all because like literally there's like a host body sort of controlling where the traffic flows, and a lot of like existing proof market designs kind of rely on this mechanism. This has the obvious disadvantage that it's not permissionless. You control who gets in, who gets what job, and if that host service goes down, your service will degrade anyway. So it actually, I call them dinos, decentralized in name only, because they're kind of like faking it. A fully decentralized service is one where there's nobody in charge. People can join, people can leave, people can take up requests. You have to compete, and there is no mechanism whereby I can decide or any body can decide who gets what proof. And that is true power because then you unleash the entire market in one go. Thousands upon thousands of provers coming in. Now, the initial question was always when that happens, can you do liveness guarantees? Can you give 3 nines, 4 nines of uptime? Boundless for the past a month and a half or whatever like has been delivering at 3 nines. We've been at mostly 100% for the last few weeks. Like the way to do that is to like make sure people who fail their proofs, there's like another mechanism to catch it and so on and so forth. It's just more work, but we've committed to doing that work, and we're able to see 3 nines, 4 nines of uptime. The internet is decentralized. Ethereum is decentralized, and obviously Bitcoin is decentralized. There are multiple examples such as these where like decentralization makes the network more valuable, reach its potential, and actually grows much faster. So we really, really value decentralization. It's a much harder problem to solve. It's way easier, and it is the common norm to punt it. Say that like we will be decentralized in the future, and that future never really arrives because it is a really hard problem. We saw these services that were already up and at they were functioning already, and we realized either you should move to AWS and get your 4 nines of uptime and deal with the regular billing, or go decentralized, which is Boundless. Everything in between is is the worst of both worlds. You don't get the solidity of AWS, the sort of guarantees, and they charge for it. Obviously, AWS is oodles more expensive than running your own data center, and that's one option. Or you go with Boundless, you get similar uptime, you get decentralization, you get Web3 nativeness, and it's basically, like I said, the P50 for our price is currently $0. So you will get proving at a much lower rate because of the increased competition. It is also like, if anyone's listening and they're an econs graduate, seriously, the market design on Web3 is where the fun is. It is full body contact capitalism. There is a student who just graduated high school and is moving towards college, participated in mainnet beta and just dominated the field. It's a throwback to the Bitcoin era where kids with like in their dormitories were mining Bitcoin. He was beating out like Nasdaq listed companies and having fun at it. The person wanted to remain anon, so I told them like, "Hey, I go on podcasts and stuff. I don't even want to know who he is." I happen to know the gender because it just came up, but beyond that, I don't know anything else about him. He talks to my product guys, but it is amazing to see that there is a way for someone to outcompete like large players and so on. That's really the power of a decentralized network versus a distributed network where you pick and choose. Obviously, you want to pick a partner who is not a college student. You would end up working with AWS and so on and so forth. So, what really are you doing to proliferate ZK, proliferate more provers, and so on and so forth? So, those are like the trade-offs worth considering. And of course, all of this has an impact on the token design as well. Decentralized network will have a token that is very decentralized as well. Isn't that the ultimate goal of any network? To be in the hands of the community and the people who use it, who value it, and so on and so forth. So that is a meta goal as well. If concentration of the tokens is with like a few players who were picked and chosen to be the players, then that causes downstream effects which are hard to verbalize up front, but easy to discern down the road. So yeah.
Yeah, got it. And it's really great to hear that Boundless is all about decentralization from the beginning. So building its protocol from the ground up to be decentralized, as opposed to maybe some other solutions that have decentralization, say later in the roadmap. And it's very cool to also hear that Boundless was designed in a way where you gave that example of that recent graduate, like a single individual who was able to outcompete all of these big players. So really great to hear that capability as well. And then even all the other aspects that Boundless has to its token design, decentralizing that as well. So great to hear that it's not just like, say, selective parts of the design that is decentralized. Because there is the question, well, if some parts of your protocol are decentralized, other parts are centralized. Is it really decentralized, or is it actually centralized? So really great to hear that all of these components considered were all built to be decentralized from the ground up.
I mean, we ended up doing an experiment accidentally. I wrote a post about it called Chaos Monkey, where as we moved away from Reciro to become our own entity, the DNS profile for Boundless got lost in the transition, and we lost the rights to be boundless.xyz for like I want to say like something like 10 hours or 12 hours. So all our provers, our tech, our website, everything just went down. The network kept running, 100% uptime, all proofs completely served. That's what decentralized means, is that if there is an earthquake in Seattle and some of the tech team is taken out, touch wood never happens, but if that happens, like the network still goes on. That is important. That is the true test of decentralization, is if you flip the switch on your own servers and everything turns off, is the network still going? We made that promise before we even built Boundless. It was hard for people. People thought it was a punchline. Like when I was trying to, they were like, yeah, everyone says that. We accidentally proved that that's what we built. And we were, my product manager, Jacob, was like extremely happy. At the same time, I was interviewing someone for our SRE role to provide info support. They were extremely happy because on call is better in a world where like you can't actually take down the entire network. So that's that's really powerful. It's also a lesson for folks who have a similar background to me. We used to spend hundreds of millions of dollars at Lyft keeping our infrastructure up. Who's on call for me? Ethereum, Solana, Base. These are the guys who are on call for me. I'm not going on call. There is a compounding effect that we're able to really harness here, that people who design systems should be looking at. This is the new paradigm for web design, where you can actually build atop people's efforts. The fact that Ethereum never goes down, again, hopefully it doesn't ever, means I can actually build on Ethereum and never go down. And we are showing this with like our decentralized network as well. So we're very happy that our design worked out. So yeah.
Yeah, and what would be one team's nightmare was actually ended up being very beneficial for the Boundless team because it was that real test of decentralization and being able to keep that network up even when the servers were down. So yeah, that's a great story. And I also wanted to speak to you about how Boundless coined the term the proof of verifiable work. So wanted to hear more about the process for making that term its concept and the idea of the financialization of verifiable compute. I know we previously briefly mentioned this when we were discussing about generating that flywheel effect, but wanted to hear more details about how Boundless really treats verifiable compute as a commodity, and from there, how the term proof of verifiable work was coined.
Yeah, so I think everyone is mostly familiar with proof of work. It's how the Bitcoin protocol sort of sustains itself. It's not a consensus algorithm, but it is a mechanism by which the protocol actually like works. Interestingly, like that's we realized there are properties of proof of work that were applicable for our network as well. Previous proven networks or networks that were trying to like sell compute, what they would do is basically either have a race on to see who can get the work done faster, and they claim the price, which is very similar to Bitcoin's design, where there's like a massive race between like every miner in the world to like find the next secret recipe to get the hash rate. But that has like an inherent flaw that everyone points out. Even talk show hosts, like late night hosts, pointed out, which is, yeah, you're wasting power. It's like everybody's chasing the same thing and you're just wasting power. Sometimes we call it a puzzle that everyone is solving. It's not actually a puzzle, you're just finding a hash with leading zeros. Proof of verifiable work was our idea of how to really turbocharge proof of work for a marketplace that sells ZK proofs, and for a market that understands what a ZK proof is. So it's I think everybody's idea of market is supply design wham. Supply demand wham. Just put it together and it's it. You're done. You have a market. But the best markets in the world, financial markets or rideshare markets, or markets that actually understand what is being traded and use the properties of this asset to build a much more niche marketplace. From that perspective, proof of verifiable work actually understands what a ZK proof is, that there are cycles involved. We've actually changed our proof system to actually add metadata to every proof that is cryptographically secured. So you can't actually, if you break the seal, then basically the proof is invalid. So you can't really spoof this. What that means is every epoch, just like blockchains, we also have an epoch. Every epoch, we can actually look at all the provers and how much work everybody's done, and basically be like, okay, Alice did 200 cycles, Shiv did 100 cycles, so Alice deserves 2 times the emission rewards that Shiv deserves. So it's not a race anymore. Everybody can participate. For Bitcoin mining, for example, there is no point in me trying to mine Bitcoin on my laptop anymore. The odds are infinitesimal that I am going to beat out these provers with ASICs and like giant machines with unlimited free electricity and so on. Whereas in this setup, it doesn't matter. I bring some compute to the network, I get rewarded for that compute. I offer my services, I do whatever I can, and I get a fair share of like the work that I offer. This flips the narrative completely on how prove a market design, where everybody can participate, everybody can sell their supply, as it were, and basically increases the size of the pie, increases participation, which is why we have 2,500 provers and counting, which is why there's going to be horizontal scalability baked into our network because of this. More people compete, the value of the token goes up, subsidy effect goes up, cost of ZK goes down, more demand shows up, more supply shows up. That's how markets function. So that's proof of verifiable work, I would say, was one of the most important innovations and a key integral part of Boundless. Something that is unique to us, and something that makes our market extremely competitive in terms of prices and so on.
Absolutely. And I really like the point you mentioned that the best markets in the world are the ones that are able to utilize the properties of the underlying assets to build a more niche marketplace. And I suppose for Boundless, what that was being able to make sure that every user who dedicated, who like brought some compute to the network, would get their fair share and would get rewarded. And that makes it so that even the barrier of entry for participating as a prover is low because even those that are, say, proving from a laptop can still get their fair share of work as opposed to like maybe some other protocols where there's no way to compete against these GPU clusters or these people with very like beefy machines. So really great to hear how Boundless can make that barrier to entry, especially as joining a prover so low. And then I know that a lot of like proof marketplaces and proving networks also have to like address the idea or like the concern about potential monopolization, which I suppose since Boundless was built to be decentralized from the ground up, that's not really too big of a concern. But wanted to hear from your side how Boundless addresses any kinds of like edge cases or those kinds of potential scenarios of, say, provers outscaling competition by receiving most of the, say, proof generation requests, and then any kinds of like possibilities of them raising the rates and making the prices no longer really affordable for any users who are requesting for proofs. So wanted to hear about if the Boundless team like took any kinds of measures to prevent these types of scenarios.
Yeah, so there's like two or three things to like sort of think about here. One is we need to have like a baseline of like cost for proving. So for this discussion, let's assume it's AWS. It's not going anywhere. It's going to stay, and AWS machines cost whatever 20 cents an hour or some number that I don't remember to do proving. So there is no world in which anybody can raise cost beyond that, because the second you go beyond that, I'll just use AWS, become a prover, and like beat you out. So there is no mechanism for someone on our network, maybe all networks, but definitely on our network, to raise prices beyond what you will get charged in the best cloud companies in the world. So that is one bulwark. And actually, one of the things that we're considering is just having a bot in place that'll just spin up an AWS cluster in case anybody like ever tries to charge more than that. There's going to be a clear opportunity for somebody to just come in there and like beat them out on price. So that's never going to happen realistically. With respect to like sort of large players, there are going to be large players who will bring a lot of machines because it's valuable. It's a business. And that actually means really good things for people who want demand. Really good competition driving prices down is important so that ZK proofs are cheaper and cheaper. The ultimate way to sort of like the economic analysis, if you were to do that, is you actually look at the utility that people get out of the service, and it actually increases if larger players bring lots and lots of machines and so on, and they service this demand at a high quality, at a high premium. Now, the question that like immediately pops up next is what happens to the smaller players? Do they get edged out? Because of proof of verifiable work, since you do get rewarded for the work that you do, it's actually a very healthy thing, which means there is space for everybody who's of every different size to like keep playing. To make sure they're getting rewards. If you bring 100 machines and I'm working with, somebody who's bought like 1 million machines, think of it this way. Now I'm competing with them for jobs, yes, but now they also value the token so much that they bought a million machines. So whatever I get is worth a lot more as well. So this is actually extremely lucrative. It is one of the best setups I've seen where if there are bigger players involved, it's actually way more valuable for you. Actually quite similar to Bitcoin as well. The fact that there are ASICs and all these like manufacturers building ASICs and mining Bitcoin means everybody who participated earlier on and held on to their Bitcoins now are shopping for yachts. So it is a generally good thing to see a lot of competition. So basically, price gouging is not possible because as long as service providers exist, you're never going to beat them. As long as ZK VMs run on GPUs, manufactured by NVIDIA, which is going to be the case for a long time, that's not an issue either. There is no, and as long as proof of verifiable work exists, there's always a mechanism for you to make money. So we're very confident in our design that smaller players don't get edged out; they actually profit and are find themselves in a much better situation when like larger players actually show up. We also found that this is way healthier for like people requesting proofs as well. So again, it's a win-win-win. Again, because of proof of verifiable work, decentralization. The second you take any of these, it's like one of these tools with like three legs. The second you take one of these like legs away, these things become like an actual problem. As long as this exists, Boundless is uniquely well set up to attract the best players, the smaller players, the bigger players, the college kids, the high school kids. I really want to see elementary school kids as well, but like I don't think that's happening.
Yeah, it's really great that you can, address for all of these different types of players. And even for these bigger players, it's actually beneficial for these smaller players. They get even bigger profits from that and driving the value of the network as well. So in this case, from what I'm hearing, those smaller players still get their fair share. They don't get edged out. And it's also healthier for requesters as well because of lower prices. So it looks like a kind of like a win-win scenario here.
Yep.
And on to also the other part of the driving the user behavior. We previously talked about how there's two main components. There's the incentivization piece. There's also the UX piece, and the Boundless team put a lot of focus on the incentivization piece. But from what I'm aware, you guys are also very heavily focused on the user experience piece as well. So making sure you have that end-to-end integration of the proving marketplace to any kinds of protocols that are being integrated with. So I wanted to learn more about the user experience process and also what the proof life cycle looks like for a proof that's being generated on Boundless and how that looks like from the point of view of a requester.
Yeah, so that's very important for us. There is no world in which like we can let go of anything, right? Like to be a successful business, there are a bunch of like points to hit. Incentivization as well as user experience, dev experience. Every single thing is important. Customer obsession, as some people know, is in the waterworks here in Seattle. For anybody who's requesting a proof, we wanted to make sure that the experience is as native as possible. We don't want you to get out of your comfort zone. The comfort zone for a lot of like people building on Ethereum chains, which are most of them, and Solana as well, is you just write a smart contract. Right? So you're used to writing your logic in a smart contract, calling other smart contracts, and waiting for events and so on and so forth. That's really the experience that you get, which is you're in your smart contract, you have your control logic, you get to a point, and you go, I have all my inputs. So I'm going to call this other smart contract, the boundless smart contract, and say like, I would like this program executed. Here are the inputs for the program. This is how much I'm willing to pay for it. I need my proof done in 10 hours or whatever. And whoever picks up the job, I'd like them to put up some collateral of 10,000 ZK coin or something, so that I know that like nobody will pick up the order and not do the job, for example. And you throw that out there. The boundless smart contract picks it up, talks to the set of provers, talks to the network, gets the right person to do the job. The proof lands on chain, you get a notification, and you just continue with your control flow logic. It almost feels exactly like AWS, where you use AWS Lambda functions, where you just go, my program's running. Oh, I'm at this point. I'll just throw a task out there. The task is solved. I get an event, and I just continue. Um, it is familiar to people. It is easy to use, easy to discern, easy to put into your programming model, into your application model, and that's really been the goal. That's of course at the application design front. There are also like user experiences sometimes at the application level, and we also work with a lot of chains themselves who want to move towards becoming validity roll-ups and so on and so forth. We make all of these points of integrations easy as well. OP Kailua is our mechanism for taking a optimism chain and putting them on the path towards becoming a validity rollup. Just a smart contract deployment and you're done. This is the way forward where zkification should not take a huge amount of effort. Some familiarity with Rust is required. We are also like working on making even that simpler and simpler. Internally, I have something called, I basically personally endorse this project called Project 30, where the idea is how do you go from idea to production in 30 days with ZK? How do you figure out what's missing and keep improving that part of the developer experience? For folks who are too young to remember, that's how the Apple ecosystem actually started. They had a similar thing as well, where they wanted mobile application development to be at a point where you can go from like, here's my idea for building this app that does something, to getting it done in 30 days. Because they correctly identified that that's how businesses are built. You build a proof of concept, you get 10 users, get a bunch of feedback, then you launch it in production, get your first 100 customers, of which 10% are paying, and you go get seed funding. You come back, get your first 10,000 users, some of whom are paying money. You build out your vision for where you want to take this app, you go get Series A. You deliver a certain amount of that, show some good numbers, and then get a Series B. Then after that, it's either more funding or you get acquired or you go IPO. And that model generated, I want to say, close to like $1 trillion in businesses and unicorns and all of that, for not just in San Francisco, but also in New York and like in Europe, in Asia, all over. We need to like develop that sort of like thinking here as well. So that's really what we're focusing on with like Project 30. How do you actually build a useful application, get it out, get your first sort of POC done, get like a few users, get feedback, get better at it, and so on. It's a little bit tougher than just writing, just going on Twitter and creating a few memes, but it's more sustainable. I also think a lot of people in crypto are slightly growing up now. A lot of people joined when they were 21. They're not 21 anymore. They're thinking about settling down, buying a house, doing all the normal things in life. And that forces you to think differently. So I do find a lot more traction for like what I'm saying. I've been saying this for a while. When I used to say this like 4 years ago, people would be like, "Nah, like we don't really care. Like that's not how things are built. It's different in crypto." But things are aligning as more and more traditional finance, traditional companies are coming in as well. People are getting serious about building businesses on Web3. Those are the kind of folks that we actually focus on. I prioritize partners, and I don't mind saying this publicly as well. I prioritize partners who are in this for the long term, and not just saying this, but actually are, and they can actually explain to me where they're taking their business and how I can help them. Because if that is true, I'm fully committed. I am committed time-wise, resource-wise, whatever we can provide to really help them succeed. Because the more we have entrepreneurs in the space who are actually building high utility applications, the better it is. That's how we move off of vibes and memes towards like becoming a sustainable industry. I want to see more people from my previous companies, Microsoft, Amazon, all of them like joining. They will, of course, there'll be a slight culture shift, but maybe for the better. They will also bring capital and adoption, all important things.
Yeah, absolutely. And about your points with the user experience, it's really great that you mentioned that you're optimizing for the experience to be as native as possible. And in that way, it's easy to use, it's familiar for people, like how you mentioned replicating the experience as if one was using AWS instead of making users learn entirely new processes and just increasing that learning curve and adoption curve. And even on your points with just general adoption, with lowering that barrier of entry, for say, like, for example, starting an application using ZK, taking, for example, the Project 30 that you mentioned, getting from an idea to production in just a month. I mean, I think that's incredible now. Like before, just a couple of years ago, before Risk Zero and the proliferation of ZK VMs, it was so hard to even spin up a simple ZK application because people were writing in like DSLs or circuits even before that. So it's really great that now all of these, not all, but most of the technical barriers have been relieved now, and now it's just more focus on the adoption standpoint, the education standpoint, and also considering the markets as well. So really great how far we have progressed since then. And I also wanted to ask you some of the other design considerations that Boundless made. So, for example, you mentioned like implementing the core of Boundless as a smart contract. So curious to hear about the reasoning behind doing that as opposed to, say, building your own custom rollup, your own custom L2. And then there's some other considerations about the design that I'm aware of, like, for example, the price discovery through a reverse Dutch action, and then also the utilization of verifiable service agreements as well. So wanted to hear some more insights about some of those specific design considerations that Boundless made that may be different from some other proof marketplaces that currently exist.
We actually went through like a extensive discovery process for our design. Like internally, we call it Project Trident, where we had three different design considerations: build an L1, build an L2, or go the smart contract way. Everyone thought the L2 approach will actually win out, and you do see that as well. Like a lot of people just sort of like whack an L2 and just get on with it. Basically, because you can just call up Conduit or someone and be like, "Hey, just put up an L2, thanks," and they're done, and put in your credit card and you're ready to go. But it does bring challenges with for the user experience. Firstly, now I need to get your L2. You have a native token that I'm using to pay for all my proofs. I need to bridge stuff over, and I need to hold your tokens. People think, oh, that's fine. I'm like, it's fine if you're like an individual. It's not fine when you're a company. When you're a firm and you have to manage all these resources, it becomes extremely complicated, convoluted even, and unnecessary to a large extent. It's just because you've chosen to be an L2 that now we have to do all these things. There's also the question of like, now you're aligned, right? You're like a ETH aligned L2, or if you're a network extension, you're Solana aligned, or like whatever, what have you. That actually limits your ability to reach customers as well. I think being non-aligned or neutral is important in this business. If you want to talk to everybody, I'm not saying you have to be friends with everybody, but you definitely see everybody as a customer. That's just plain old business. Like, you don't want to get into a camp unless you feel that is strategic for you, and like that's how you're going to raise your funds. And again, it's quite true in our industry that people see that as like a way to raise funds and stuff. We're thinking longer term, so we don't really want to be like any aligned sort of like setup as well. Building an L1, I've managed an L1 before. I can tell you it is an incredible pain. Very few things are worth that effort unless you have like a core innovation that is going to make your L1 better than everybody else's L1. If it is some business distribution vibe thingy, yeah, screw it. Like, it's not going to happen. I've already done it. It's not, you don't sleep. I wouldn't recommend it unless you have a new consensus algorithm or like a new way to do it. Best of luck then, but otherwise not really worth it. The other option was smart contracts, and like, how do you deploy your market to every single chain, every single EVM chain? And we are actually deployed on multiple EVM L2s, Base, the C chain on Avalanche, Ethereum, like all over the place, because we're just a smart contract. And that's great. So you just deploy a smart contract, you're live. Now, for any L2 that launches that is EVM based now, they can also launch our smart contract on their market as well, on their chain as well. That's amazing because it actually solves the cold start problem across the board. Because let's say I'm only on Ethereum today, and I'm serving all of Ethereum's traffic. Solana comes live the next day. because you're all talking to the same pool of provers, my provers are already primed and pumped. They're already running. You don't start your pricing at some new sort of level. You just inherit the volume of Ethereum and basically just compound it, and like pricing just prices, the demand just rises and the prices just go down as more supply shows up. This is great. So you don't need to cold start per chain. That makes us very, very unique. So we thought that was of course, it comes with challenges, writing, good contracts, making sure these auctions can go as quickly as possible, which is why we chose reverse Dutch auctions, because that makes price discovery really quick. You work backwards and reverse, as it were, and find a best fit really, really quickly. On mainnet beta, we are seeing like auctions go under 100 milliseconds or even less, which is fantastic, which is as fast as it gets. So you're able to like get your orders done really, really quickly. Now there are a few customers who don't even want that, who like either for compliance reasons or for some other reason, they're like, oh, I want to just have my jobs done by person X. It's sometimes a compliance thing where it's like, oh, I'm in Korea, so I can only use Korean provers, and I'm just working with this prover. I have like an off-chain agreement with them. Could you just like redirect my request to them? We're like, okay, that's fine too. You will lose the benefit of like lower prices, but that's fine. This person does these jobs, and they gain the ability to mine tokens. It's just that it's not reflected in the price, or if it is, it's reflected in some other mechanism off chain. So you won't get the full discount of like ZKC. You'll get like an approximation or whatever the supplier offers. These are important because these are SKUs, right? Like SKU. These are different sort of versions of the product that people want to use. If you flip open your Uber app, you see 5 or 6 options: Uber Plus, Uber Premium, Uber Share, and a bunch of others that I don't use. These are important because there is a certain type of customer who wants a certain kind of product. Even when you go to AWS and EC2 isn't one thing. It's like some 400 SKUs that they offer, from giant GPUs to small little machines to spot markets. It's all over the place. We are offering compute, so there is going to be that sort of differentiation. It is also a signal, and I'm kind of patting my team on the back a little bit here. This is what happens after product market fit. So everyone's chasing product market fit. I understand that. That makes sense. We actually believe ZK has great product market fit already, and Boundless is the best way to deliver ZK. What comes after that? You start segmenting. After you have general product market fit, you need to segment your market and see which side of the segment or which segments are the ones that bring the most amount of traffic, most amount of value. Where are they getting underserved? How do you overserve them? Then figure out every other segment that is being unaddressed and or is more promising, and go and service that as well. So this is our attempt to like get ahead of that curve. Something that we're going to keep doing, mostly because like the product and engineering team at Boundless is quite experienced. So we don't want to wait for the problem to show up. We know what the next problem is going to be. It is going to be these things where people are like, oh, I have a long-term commitment, or like, I don't want every single one of my orders to be like going through the auction. I just know I'm going to be streaming like 20 orders a minute. You might as well like find a bunch of people who are willing to do it at a certain price for me. Or like my orders are all big and I don't want people to fail. So how can I contact like bigger players? Like these are things that the market needs to provide as it evolves. So we are just trying to get ahead of all these problems and build for it really in partnership with people who have this kind of demand and people who have machines to satisfy this kind of demand as well. So this is also a responsibility of a market maker in a lot of ways to make sure there isn't market failure, that there is, I think the phrase is intent conversion, which is if I show up to the market with an intent, is it being served or not? So you go to Whole Foods looking to buy avocados, you're not able to buy avocados, you're sad. You do it a few times and you don't get avocados, you're like, screw Whole Foods, I'm going to some other market now. We want to make sure that there's high intent conversion as well. So I know I'm talking more like a regular product manager, but this is really how I run my internal meetings as well. We want to focus on fundamentals. So whenever someone just tells me like, oh, this banner thing is great, I'm like, how much? What's the lifetime value? how much are we spending on this? What are the KPIs? Like, how are we actually measuring success here? Why this person? I'm happy to be convinced sometimes that a banner announcement is useful as long as people have put some thought into it. It's like, oh, this is our mechanism to test out this assumption, get someone, and we are this is part of our onboarding cost for like this paradigm, and we're testing this out, and we'll know in like 2 months whether this works or not, and whether we want to double down or so on. That's the kind of thinking that we really have in this company, which means that sometimes progress looks a little bit slower, or like we don't hack shit together and just throw it out there into the ether, but it gives us a much more concrete footing to keep making progress, which has actually come to bear. I would say over the last 4 or 5 months, we made incredible progress really quickly because the foundations of Boundless are incredibly strong.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really also like that point that you made about Boundless providing flexibility with different options. I think it's very important for us to remember that our target user base doesn't just use the same like cookie cutter framework. They all have different needs, right? You mentioned that, like, for example, those maybe for some compliance reasons only wants to use certain types of provers. Maybe some people don't want every single order to go through that auction process. Maybe some people just want bigger players and stronger guarantees for their proofs. So it's really great that you're accommodating or thinking about accommodating for all those different types of needs and providing users with that option. And you even mentioned, like, for example, a lot of apps that we use today, there's always different options that users can choose from because users always want different needs. They always have different needs. And even that point you made about that importance of the high intent conversion, yeah, I believe is also very important. So great points that you made there. And just as a last question before we end today's session, I'm wondering if there's any kinds of particular applications or integrations that you're personally excited about that your Boundless is targeting, or ones that you hope to see integrated with Boundless in the future. And then also for any kinds of audience members who are watching this episode, if they want to get involved as a prover or as a proof requester, do you have any kinds of like next steps for them or any kinds form of advice for them?
Yeah, so I'll go in reverse order. So if anybody is interested, just go to boundless.network. Most of this information is available. Otherwise, just tweet at me. If I don't respond, somebody else from the team will. I'm happy to get you started. We've seen onboarding times for provers to be like a few hours at best. The smarter ones can tend to do it in like an hour because it just works out of the box. You just run shit and on your GPUs and just works out of the box. If you are building an application as well, if you're familiar with smart contracts, it takes next to no time for you to start again. We have some helper applications, but again, if you're building something very complicated, tweet at us. We're happy to make time and talk to you. With respect to sign up, the kind of applications, right? So I think there's like three applications that everybody covers. Rollups, then sort of dApps, clobs and whatever. And the next one they'll say is like centralized but verified application. Those are the three that, like, to be honest, I've also been saying for a long time. But I also feel like it's been done to death. And I'm super excited about them, but they're also happening right now. I think looking towards the future of where a lot of these new applications are headed, I had like a very interesting meeting this morning as well, with a bunch of people. Infofy and all that stuff that's going on there, where people are trying to help, I don't know how to say this, help coordinate people, I guess, around their interests and find a way to benefit them by matching them with like projects that they really like, they want to learn, and you sort of like earn by learning and all of that stuff as well. So there's like lots of interesting things going on there. But as soon as money gets involved, it gets botted and like lots of like things break down. But it is an fabulously profitable area. That's something that I feel like ZK and web proofs can like actually improve quite a bit. So we're trying to like figure out some opportunities there. I don't think it's less about Boundless, more about like that's an interesting application of like ZK. It's also a way to do KYC at a very sort of like the government needs to get. It's like a lot. I'm just trying to like weed out the bots is like a way lower bar, and we can like see some of that action there. So that's something I'm definitely interested in. There are a bunch of other applications in gaming that I'm quite interested in as well. Like you might have heard with Ronin coming in back into Ethereum and using OP stack with OP Kailua from Boundless, powered by Boundless as their chosen stack. That's something we're very interested in as well. So there's stuff evolving there in terms of like not just selling ZK. I think as a company, we always knew this was true. It's just that you can't sell ZK. That's like selling you like an engine. Okay, but you don't come to the showroom to buy an engine. You come to the showroom to buy a car. How do we work with people to actually build the car and sell cars instead? Fully managed products. So that's something that like I'm very excited about as well. There's like a few things in interop that we're doing with the signal proofs that are going to be extremely interesting. A lot of people think interop is over or bridging is done and it's nothing else to do. But that actually means what that means is that industry is matured. It makes regular money, and there's like well-established players who are doing it, and they carved themselves like good territory. I think ZK entering the sphere has the potential to shake it up again, and we're seeing that already. So I'm personally very interested in seeing multi-chain assets become the default. No, like I don't think anyone should care that your asset is living on Ethereum, is living on C chain, is living on Base. Like it's your asset, you're just using it. You should not be paying tons of money to use your own stuff. Isn't that against the ethos of like Web3 in general? ZK powered interop will reduce costs to such an extent that all assets will be multi-chain assets, which is the way it should be. So that's again something that I'm super interested in as well. Beyond that, like a lot of people talk about AI, defense tech, medical, blah blah. Like those are very interesting theoretical things that aren't going to be functional in 2026. But I do participate in some of that as well. Last thing I'll throw in there. This has nothing to do with tech. I've started getting outreach from regulators and stuff, or like people in who are interested in that space. So that's a strong signal for me. Is like, oh, okay. So people now care about verifiable compute on data that is living on Ethereum or Solana and so on as well. So that's interesting to me. I think the push from Ethereum on post quantum existence as well is like bringing this to light, because ZK is better suited for a post quantum world than most of the other technologies. So yeah, that's what gets me up in the morning.
Yeah, nice. And it's so cool to hear about all of the extensive amount of applications that verifiable compute can apply to, even in shaping this post-quantum world, and even beyond those that are just Web3 based. So, yeah, very cool to hear all of that from you. And overall, just thank you so much for this conversation, and really appreciate how you and the Boundless team really focus on the fundamentals of, say, like how these ideal markets operate, what drives user behavior in terms of incentives, in terms of UX, and how that shapes the design of Boundless, and also going with the value of decentralization as well. So, all very great insights from you, and really appreciate you for joining today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Alice, and thank you to your audience for listening to me.
Yeah, thank you.